introduction, really. So the topic we are covering is critical literature review, but I've just made it a little bit more practical probably, and phrased it as criticality in reviewing literature. And I'm assuming that you have, I think Anthony mentioned it at some point, that you've had some training or some lectures around systematic literature review. You've also interacted with the people in the library on how to search for literature and using literature management software and things like that. Now, when I do the screen share, Anthony, I can't see the Zoom page, or so I wouldn't know if anybody put anything in the chat or raised their hands. So you're going to help me to be my eyes in the room, please.
Much obliged. Much obliged.
Thank you very much. So you can stop me. I'll just be talking. Please stop me in case somebody's asking a question or raising their hands. Okay. So what are we going to cover today? So I will start by saying what you already know, or just doing a recap on exactly what is literature review. And then I will also make a bit of a highlight on why it is important to review literature on our research journey. And then dive into the issue for today, what is being critical, but also what is it not. Because sometimes we can think of being critical in a way that is, in most cases, unhealthy, not healthy. So we'll look at what criticality is not. And then we will also have a reflection on why it is important to be critical in our reading and writing of literature. And then where do we start from? How do we do it? And how do we apply criticality when we are reading? Because it starts with reading really before we write. And how do we do it when we are writing? And then I will also share with you some learning resources, some useful resources that you can go back to. And they were very helpful for me as a doctoral student. And I can share my experience with you. I did my PhD in the UK, and I'd come from Uganda, where I had done my undergraduate studies. And the education system in Uganda is sort of inclined to a spoon-feeding kind of approach, where you expect your lecturers or your instructors to tell you what you should do. And in a way, you are not prepared to question what you're told or what you read. We are sort of customized to taking it on face value. And because we are also heavily dependent on examinations, then if we want to pass, we take in all that we have been told and sort of reproduce it in the examination and then get the grades. So I had this kind of background. So coming to do a PhD in the UK, I was sort of thrown to the deep end, where my supervisors and everybody else in the doctoral school would ask my view, ask what I think, and my response would be, well, I don't know what to think. Tell me what to think. And I was expecting them to really tell me, and really difficult to question things. And yet, this is very important in doing research. Being critical is important in being research. So I struggled with it, but in the process, I found some very helpful resources which you can use to self-teach, some self-taught exercises that you can do to improve your skill as a critical reader and writer, especially when you're doing your literature review. Okay, so this is what we'll cover, but if there's any other expectation, if there's anything else that you expect, we'll have some bit of time and we can slot that in. Okay, so first, what is literature review? This is information that you already know. It's a systematic way of collecting and synthesizing previous research. So it's not haphazard. There has to be some order in it. That's why we call it systematic.
Loice, are your slides moving or your?
Are they not moving? I thought.
No, probably put on slide view, maybe help.
Yeah, it's on slide view. I'm now back to.
Okay, now at least we have gone to the next slide, but it's not on slide view yet.
So is this what is literature review on slide view?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is not on slide view, but it is the slide on what is literature review.
It's not on slide view?
Maybe other people can see it on slide view. What do other people see?
No, it's not on slide
It's
view.
not
Actually.
on slide.
Hmm. And now?
It isn't. But I guess you can continue. We can see the slide.
Was the first one on slide view?
No, it wasn't.
I don't know what's the problem because it's so I was on slide view on the first one, and when I moved to the second one, you said my slides were not moving. So
we thought you were getting ready.
It looks like probably when I move on to slide view, I go onto another screen and not. So what I will do, I will go on slide view, but you're not seeing you're not seeing me on slide view now, right?
We are not, but we saw your
Okay.
cursor going to the slide view.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing and see if I can. Oh no, it's not working. Let's see. Do you know what? I think we shall just work with not being on slide view because when I go on slide view, then you don't see my screen. It looks like
That's
my
okay.
laptop
That's okay.
opens into another screen altogether. Okay. Let's try once more. Now I'll use a slideshow from the beginning. Are we on slide view?
No, I guess we'll, as you said, just go ahead.
Let's go ahead.
Prof,
Okay.
Prof, can I suggest something? I'm thinking instead of sharing the file, you could share your screen, your entire screen.
I thought that's what I was doing. Okay, let's try again. So instead of sharing the file, I share what? The window?
Yeah, you could try sharing the window or the full screen. I think it's full screen or window.
Okay, entire screen.
Entire screen, yes. That could help.
No, it doesn't. Has it worked? Can you see the full screen?
No, it isn't. It doesn't work. So we'll just continue.
Okay, all right, let's go on. So, oh, shame. It's a shame. So it's systematic. In other words, you don't do your literature review haphazard. You have a systematic way of collecting the information, but also a systematic way of analyzing it, analyzing previous research. That's literature review. And I think what is also key here is that you synthesize previous research. So you don't merely view it, you review it. There's a difference between just viewing and reviewing. So you're not only collecting it in an ordered manner, but you are also evaluating it. But it is also an evidence-based, in-depth analysis of a subject. So whatever argument you're making about a subject, you can give evidence about that argument, and it's in depth. It's a review. It's a proper analysis of information, of evidence around a subject. The other thing is that some people say it's to identify what research has been performed and what topics require further investigation. This is to mean that we do literature review because most likely someone has done not an exact similar study, but somehow they could have to some extent found out some information about the kind of topic that you're doing. So we do identify that research and what is still missing around the same kind of investigation. I've also found out from somewhere that it's an account of what has been published on a topic by accredited scholars and researchers. Now, this is a bit insufficient because giving an account is not enough to say that it's a literature review, but I still put it here to try to make a point that literature reviews are more than just making an account of what has been published in a topic. There has to be an element of evaluating and synthesizing it, and it has to be really in depth, and to also come up with if you are to come up with the areas for further investigation, then we are doing more than an account. So basically, that's what literature review is. It's more than just looking at what other people have published or what they are saying about your topic, but also evaluating what they have put forward. Okay, so then why is it important that we review literature? So there's a story that, okay, this kind of scenario. Mukasa is a community development worker who lives in the city. And in 2021, he attended a meeting in his village. He had a lot on his mind concerning events in his community and would have loved to contribute, but he arrived late. So before making any contribution, he had to ask himself what could have been discussed before he came. So sort of an analogy, like someone coming into a discussion where people are already been discussing. So if you choose a topic of study and you decide to do research about it, and we've already mentioned that we most likely are not going to be inventing the wheel. Someone else has done it. Not just one person, but actually various people could have done an investigation around the same area. It means that they are probably sitting on a round table and they've been discussing this issue year in, year out, and you are coming to join the discussion. So if you're coming to join the discussion, which is already ongoing, and you are humble enough to say, I am not inventing the wheel, means that you need to carefully study and evaluate what the other people have already said if you're to be welcomed on the table. Actually, this is quite important when it comes to publishing. When you're going to write your papers for publication, you have to try and find which journal would you like to send your work to. And one of the most important strategy for you to get your work into this journal is to look at what other articles in that journal are saying. Look at review these articles in that same journal, and see how the authors in this particular area or on this particular subject write, the kind of language they use, the methodologies that they really like. Because the thing is that when you send out your work for publication, the editors are going to first have a look and say, is this does this come close to what we usually talk about? Does it relate to our discussion in this journal? It's a little bit political, actually. And since it's not machines that are going to be determining whether your article can be accepted or not, it's human beings who will look through. And so you need to see the kind of language these human beings are talking, the kind of phrases that they like, the approach that they really like. And if you can pass their gatekeeping eyes, then they will send it out to the reviewer, maybe 2 or 3 reviewers to look through your work. And of course, the reviewers are part of the people on their table. So it means that already there's a network, sort of a community or a gang or a group that has already done some work, the kind of work that you're doing, and it is important that you review this literature. So when they read through your work, they will see whether you can actually be a bit strategic and cite them and cite their work, and argue it, and then tell them the kind of contribution or the kind of information that you're bringing to the table, or argument or approach that you're bringing to the table, so they can be interested and say, oh yeah, come, would like to listen to you. Imagine if Mukasa just got into this meeting where the discussions are already going because he arrived late, and then started to talk, and he could have been repetitive, he could have brought solutions that are already there, he could have been irrelevant. So it is important for him to just listen and see what has gone before, what has been discussed before, so that he can know how to get himself in. I've just mentioned that this is important for when you're planning to submit a paper for publications, but it is also important for your thesis, for your dissertation, because one of the big issue on the criteria for evaluating thesis, PhD thesis, is a question of what contribution you have made. and you contribute to something that you already know. If you don't, and if you haven't evaluated something to see where it's missing, it has a missing link or a gap where you can position yourself, then you will not be able to articulate what your contribution is. So for this purpose, a good literature review is quite important in research. This is why we have to do that. And if a good literature review is one that has been approached with a critical lens, where there's a bit of criticality. Okay, so why is it important to review literature? I think I've just mentioned, first, you really want to determine the extent to which your research questions have been already tackled. You don't want to be, if you get to Viva and you begin to produce things which your opponent or your examiners already know, they are likely to say, this we already know, this issue is already is already fixed. You're trying to repeat so and so's work. They may pull out a gulu in your area and they say, oh, so and so is already told us how to fix this, or there's knowledge, a lot of knowledge around this, and for you to avoid this, to avoid that, you need to determine the extent to which your research questions have been already tackled. Maybe the answers are not the answers in the literature are missing at a particular point. We are going to be seeing how you can be able to critique people's writing while you're reading, to see what is missing, what's still there, so that your argument, when you're making a particular argument, then you can make that argument from evidence, from an informed point of view. Because a PhD is, of course, like no other level of studying, because it has a high level of independence. In other words, you choose your own area of research, and you have to do it deeply in order to get respect and to be like an authority in that particular area. So for you to be able to gain that confidence and to convince everybody else that this is an important argument, this is an important area for me to study, and I am making a significant claims around this particular area, you have to have understood what has gone before, and the extent to which these have not been answered, so that everybody can listen to you and can see it as plausible, worth the time, worth the investment of money, and be seen as an important contribution to that particular area. And then another thing is that when we review literature, we get sort of a solid ground on which to justify our research focus, and also our methodological choices. So I will show you later how this really comes about, because if you find a particular area that is missing or is still worth exploring, that finding from the literature review is the one that should actually lead to your methodological choices. How you decide to do research, you should be able to justify it from your literature review, to show that in literature this and this was covered, but this area is still, and it's still not clear. We need this kind of information, and therefore this is how I'm going to do the research. Because you need to collect data that actually collect and analyze data that is going to answer the question that you have set, and these questions are also informed by literature. So a solid literature review would help you to justify your focus, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it, which includes your methodological choices. A literature review, of course, helps you to identify the key scholars in your research for further conversations. It may be the further conversation might be about you're assessing your thesis, or they are assessing your paper publications. That's further conversation, because the the key scholars in your research, like I already mentioned, they are likely to be picked on to be your external examiners. They are likely to be picked on to be your opponents. They are likely to be picked on to be your reviewers of your paper publications. So you do literature review to really identify this. This is why, if you know a guru in your subject, I don't know the range of topics that you have. But maybe at this point, could you please put in the chat the kind of research you are doing? Each one of you, maybe just 2 or 3 people, could you please drop in the chat the kind of research that you're doing, so I can be able to pick relevant examples. I'll stop sharing the screen in a minute, then I can pick those up and then use them to give some examples as I explained. So if you're doing a particular kind of research, there'll be some key scholars, but you probably want to find 2 or 3 key scholars in your area and find their work, find their literature and the work that is relating to your study. And as you read that, you can follow up their citations. So you can go back to their reference list and then get more people to follow, so that you find those key people who are saying the same things, or who are focusing on what you're focusing on. So in a minute, could you please, can we please have some volunteers to drop in the chat what their studies are about, please? Okay, net zero. Net zero carbon. See, climate change is important in this clean energy. Anything else? Anybody else? Can I have something different from climate change? Anybody with something from carbon and green energy and okay. Death registration, smart cities, again, climate change. Okay. Yeah, so there are lots and lots of publications on climate change. Depending on your question, someone was talking about affordability of clean energy. So you need to find people who are actually, or who have done a lot of work around this, and then you can follow their citations to be able to gather the key key scholars. So when we are doing literature search, sometimes the following using keywords in your study is key, but citations is also very important, because then you are able to know who is on the round table, who is on this table where you're trying to knock and ask that you could be part of them. So use the keywords, yes, to do your search, and then you can find literature that is relevant, but also see who is like a popular author or someone who has been referred very many times, and then use citations to find more people who are in your study. So we do literature review to find these key scholars. So being critical, what is it? So being critical is going beyond summarizing, describing, and explaining the literature. In other words, when you go to read the literature, you go beyond just reading it like a novel or a newspaper or just information. You go beyond, and when you're writing it, you need to go beyond summarizing it, describing it, or explaining it. If you do this, in most cases, they will say that your literature review is very descriptive and something is missing. So it is going beyond that. It's going beyond just summarizing and describing and explaining saying this author said that, that author said that, this author is emphasizing that. That's good, but it probably is not good enough. It doesn't go to being critical. It is analyzing. So beyond summarizing, describing, and explaining, you have to analyze and evaluate this information. We'll have a look on how that happens. And after you have done the analysis and the evaluation, then you exercise judgment. It means that you are sort of like what's the right word? You're really an evaluator rather than just someone looking for information. You are an evaluator of this information so that you can be able to exercise judgment. And once that judgment is made, then you are going to present an argument. You're going to present an inclination. You're going to present sort of your conclusion, but that argument, it is based on it is evidence based, but it is also reasoned. You're reasoning. You can say this is what they said, because you, in that way you're describing it. They said it, but also they missed this or that. You're analyzing and evaluating it. And in light of this analysis and evaluation, the judgment is that we still don't understand the we still don't understand the economical approaches to clean energy, or how to, or we still don't understand how to measure clean energy, depending on what your research question is. So we can say that we've had information about clean energy, it is this and that. We know the approaches to getting there. But it looks like this information does not provide that or that. And the judgment is that without this information, without knowing how to get this in an economical way, we will still be lacking on achieving ABCD. So the argument is that we need to adjust in the way we are measuring. So you put there your argument, but it has evidence from your summary, from your analysis and from your evaluation, and you've made a judgment that we can see that it is plausible. You have plausible evidence for the judgment that you have made. And then, but being critical is not necessarily pointing out fault or fraud or unhealthy criticizing of other people's work. You know that in research, you cannot claim to have exhausted a subject. You cannot claim to have exhausted, found out everything. You talk about the extent to which your study went. That's why at the end of our dissertations, or even in our papers for publication, we mention areas for further research. So it's not being critical is not saying this work is not good, or this work is not this work is rubbish, or anything like that. Unhealthy criticism. It's mentioning the areas that are still lacking and which are important in order to take this knowledge further, or to contribute to the knowledge that is already existent. So in other words, being critical is uh, going below the tip of the iceberg, as it were, to see the underlying issues that are not really on the surface, and you capitalize on that information below the tip of the iceberg to make your argument. So the author of the article that you read, or the literature that we read, is going to just be showing us the tip of the iceberg of the information that we are looking for, but there could be other issues below the tip of the iceberg, and it's a big one. You're not going to bring this whole bit up to the surface for everybody to say. You may just pick a chunk and say this particular chunk is below the tip of the iceberg, and my research is going to bring it up to make the tip bigger, and make the below, the portion below, smaller. So I'm contributing to what we know and extending knowledge. So that's being critical. And probably some of you are familiar with this model, Bloom's taxonomy of studying, where the model emphasizes that at a particular level, you just need to remember things and understand them and probably apply them. So if you read something and you can recognize the facts, you can remember them, you understand them, and you apply them. It's a bit, hello?
Yeah, please go ahead. I think he has muted.
Okay. Yeah, so this level up to applying is what would be descriptive. And if you read your literature review and you're just telling your reader what you saw there, what you understood by what you saw there, and how that is applicable in your research, they may say that you are only describing, and actually this is not very helpful for you to be able to identify the gap. If you can just narrate what you read from your literature and what you understand by it, and what it means to your research, then you may not be able to find the gap. For you to be able to find the gap, then you need to really analyze that and evaluate, and then create your own argument. Until you create your own argument, your PhD project will not be what most people may say rigorous. It may lack some rigor, and It may also not give you confidence. You get the confidence about your project when you create your own argument. So and justification, like I mentioned, justification of your methodological approaches and choices, and come from the argument that you have created from the literature review. So there's something new, like combining parts to make a new whole, combining the information that the existent scholars have put forward, the knowledge that they have put forward, for you to be able to say, okay, this is what is available, but this is really lacking, and you can be able to show your reader that where that is really coming from. There's evidence, there's reasoning, it's coherent, and it flows naturally, and we can all see where it's coming from, and then you're confident about it and say, this is my PhD, this is my contribution, this is my, I am confident about this. I don't know the process at CEDAT, but sometimes some schools, you need to have this in order for you to in your proposal, in your research proposal, for you to be able to convince everybody that this is worth a doctoral project, and then you're given a go ahead to go to the field and become a doctoral researcher. It's expected at a higher level for a PhD. For a master's program, the period is a bit short, but for a PhD, then it has to be really, really thorough. So this is why criticality is quite important on a PhD journey, because otherwise your work might be rated as one that is not to the standard of a doctorate study, or it might be evaluated as one that is not creating any new knowledge, or anything new. It doesn't have to be just knowledge. Maybe in the natural sciences, you can produce an innovation or something like that. So this is quite important. Okay, so I've just asked, do you have to be critical in reading and writing literature reviews? I think at this point, I'm likely to get a resounding yes. We have to be critical in reading and writing our literature reviews. There's no shortcut for a PhD. You have to be critical. But there are some of the reasons why we need to be critical. The obvious one. Are my slides readable? Are you able to read this one, for example? Can you see what's written in the box?
Yes, we can read.
Okay, good. So it's an academic requirement. It's a criteria for grading your thesis. Even before the thesis, they will use it as a criteria for grading your proposal. I don't know if you've done your proposal defense at this point. But if you've done your defense and maybe you are already ahead, can I check, Anthony, has the cohort done the proposal defense or not yet?
For this cohort, they haven't yet done their proposal defenses, but we have a few who are slightly ahead. And for those ones, they are already writing, but many of them have not yet done their proposal defenses. We're hoping to do that by August, not in August, but by August.
Okay, for those who haven't, now it's an opportunity for you to go and think through your work again and see how much of evaluating you have really done, so that you're not describing things and presenting things that are already there, or not being really confident about your project, because no one else is doing this exactly the same thing as you're doing, even though there could be related works and literature around it. You have to find your own niche. You have to find your own argument, your own, and convince everybody that this is worth it, because that's what those who are evaluating your proposal are going to be looking for. And for those of you who have already defended and gone ahead, uh, also maybe check if you have this really in your grips, that you are convinced this kind of work has already been done, but there's something missing here, and you can give plausible evidence for your argument, because it's a requirement and it's part of the criteria for grading your work. But it is also very good practice to recognize what others have already said in the debate. Like Mukasa, you don't want to get to the village meeting and you are you are saying things which people have already said, or you are contradicting them, but also quite important, you know, reviewers of your papers and editors of journals are very powerful people in the academic journey. They are very powerful. If you don't recognize what they have already said, they can take it as an offense. And some of them, they can be very, very unhappy. uh, Sometimes they can have it in an unhealthy manner where, for example, an external examiner just takes it personal when you don't cite their work. I'm not saying that you should cite the work of all the people that you think are going to be evaluating, and then you cite it even when it is not uh, in an appropriate way. You have, but what I'm really saying is that you have to recognize the people that have gone before you in your work, because in the first place they are the ones who are going to be evaluating it, either as you submit your articles for publications or as you submit your work for evaluation at the end of the PhD. But the other thing is why we have to really be critical is that I told you at the beginning that I had come from an education system where we are not well prepared to question material, academic material. We somehow think that if it has been published, then it's the alpha and the omega. But the truth is that academic material is not always exhaustive or perfect. So you need to go with this, even if it's published by your favorite Professor Mamudani has published something. It's not always exhaustive. And I think rational academics or researchers, they appreciate the fact that they have not exhaustively written on something. So you need to go with this attitude, with these lenses, while reading academic material. But the other thing is that sadly, it's not always perfect. So you can be able to find these gaps. And you, as a PhD student, your voice in your work is very important. And I think if you've had education in Uganda, like me, if you had your education in Uganda, like me, sometimes we try to be modest. We think it's a good thing, and you're shy about your arguments. And of course, we shouldn't be respectful. We shouldn't come across as rude or too ambitious or anything like that. But neither should we be too modest. You need to put your voice there, and because that gives you the confidence, and show that you have analyzed other authors' materials and you're able to bring your voice to the table and be confident about it. And I also mentioned that there's no way you can make logical conclusions and coherent arguments unless you are critical, unless you have evaluated. And like I mentioned in one of the slides, that you can summarize, you can mention all these things, but you need to put there your evaluation of the information that you're having, so that you can be able to make a coherent argument. If one of the things that you have to do, for some of you are still writing your proposal, is that you must show your examiners why you have chosen certain methodological you've made certain methodological decisions. If you say you'd like to do a mixed method approach, for example, if you say you would like to do a survey to get your data, you need to justify why you are going to do that. And the justification is not sufficient if you say that a survey is cheap, or a survey can help us to collect large quantities of data. That's okay. That's generic in a way, but you need to find something that relates to your specific study, why a survey is important for your specific inquiry. And that reason is usually found by being critical of what's already been happening, and the gap that you have found out, and the nature of the gap that you have found out, and what would be an ideal, the nature of the data that you need to answer to fill the gap that you have found out. And then that kind of information is only obtained when you're critical of what has already been done. So it's just the only way you can make logical conclusions and coherent arguments for your methodological choices. And also later on in the other chapters, the discussion and the conclusions, they all have to really come from a critical perspective, a critical way of writing. Also, it is the best way to demonstrate that you understand theoretical concepts. You can convince your examiners and everybody else, the reviewers, that you clearly understood. You are not only explaining things, but you understand them and you can evaluate them, and you have a clear grip of the concepts. What is net zero? What does that really mean? What's carbon emission? What does it mean? And the various specific issues around the subject. Demonstrate this understanding by critically writing about it. And of course, generally, critical analysis is important for problem solving and societal well-being. If we just keep seeing things on the tip of the iceberg, we would never be able to create sustainable solutions. I see some of you are into climate change, so sustainability is an issue for you. Without critical lenses, there's no way we can be able to get sustainable solutions. Now, I would like to take some moment to check with you about what you're thinking so far. And so I'll stop sharing. So what are you thinking so far? Have you been critical? Is this something you're feeling is new to you? What are your feelings? If you could you please unmute and let me know. What are you thinking? Anybody? Yes, Robert.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. My I'm seeking for some kind of clarification regarding the difference between narrative review, and critical review. Are they kind of related, or they are totally different? And if they're different, where is the dimension of difference?
Well, I wasn't hoping to discuss the types of reviews because there isn't like a universal agreement, and different people call different things differently. So for critical review, there people say every review is a critical review. While the narrative review, sometimes people say you're just making it's. In fact, some people think that a narrative write-up on literature is not a review. Some people might argue, because you are just describing and not making specific evaluations, but just a description of the review. So for me, if I am to make a difference, narrative review and critical review, one would be on the other side of the pendulum, and the other would be on the other side of the pendulum, where the narrative review would be just about describing information about, like, sometimes would think that if you've read some book reviews, they call them reviews, but that's something that someone might actually say it's a narrative review. What they feel about a book, they read about a book and then they just write it. But any other review, for example, for the dissertations, for research students, for publications, for papers, a narrative review would not suffice. It would be something that has some criticality around it. But having said that, there are various types of reviews, literature reviews. I was telling Anthony that systematic reviews are becoming very common. He mentioned to me, and I agree. But the description or the technicalities of doing systematic review are a bit really special from what I had known for the past few years, but things keep really changing. But to answer your question, really, I would think narrative review and critical review are on the other side of the pendulum, making a description, and narrative reviews is not what a PhD student would want to go to, because they wouldn't give you that that creativity, that top bit of Bloom's taxonomy, that creativity of a new thing. You may not be able to achieve it through a narrative review. This is what I think. But of course, with research methods, different people have different attitudes over things. Okay, does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome. Rachel?
Thank you so much for your presentation. Actually, it was really, really beautiful. Just what is standing out for me is the idea of using Bloom's taxonomy when you're assessing your methodology or how you're doing your review. I think that is very important to go from understanding all the way to creating something. I think that stands out for me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Actually, Bloom's taxonomy is, people use it a lot for evaluating assignments, especially if they are expecting that you don't just describe your assignment, but it can also apply to, like, self-assessment with your literature review and see where you are and see if you've just described things or not. And somebody with the Galaxy 7.
Hello.
Hello?
Thank you, Doctor, for the presentation. I think I've been eagerly waiting for this. When you talk about critical review, it's been a very challenging part for me. I've been reading several articles, but finding what you said, a gap, and how I make a contribution to it has been my challenge. How do I get to say what I want to say about a particular text or a particular information, and how do I trace what I want to pick out? I think it's still my challenge. I think I'm thinking that this interaction is going to benefit me a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the next slides are going to be about the practical tips, but maybe I'm going to try this Padlet and see if it works. Do people have some ideas for what's your name again? The last person who asked this question.
Sorry, Edward.
Edward, if you can people please click on the link in the chat, and while there, if you haven't used the Padlet before, you'll see a plus sign on the right bottom corner. And if anybody manages to see that plus sign, please let me know, or manages to get to this site. Can you see the link in the chat?
Yes, we can see the link.
Okay, anybody clicked there? And what do you see?
A purple background.
Okay, there's a plus sign in the bottom right. If you click on the plus sign in the bottom right, it will give you an opportunity to put in some information. Please write for me, what practical tips can we follow to be critical literature reviewer?
That is in the middle.
Yeah, okay, there's a plus sign. If you click on the plus sign, let me share my screen and I'll show you what's happening. There should be a plus sign in the
Is it further to the right?
Yes, the bottom right corner. Can't see that?
There is an option of the question appearing in the center, and at the bottom there is add comment. Does that do the same?
Can you just add your comment? I haven't seen any comments coming, but I will keep this link in the slides. Okay, yeah, they are coming. Good. Good, that we should not be fault finding. Good. We should read and explore literature broadly. Yes. Are there people who are already practicing something, some tips we can follow. Find the argument gap, good. Identify the gap, yes. Okay, so we will keep it at this, but the link is going to remain in the slides, and I'll share the slides with Anthony. And every time you use these slides, you can click there to see what your colleagues, you can add more to the discussion, continue the discussion even after this class. And then you can also ask more questions there and continue this debate. If you have found, if you've been to the library, or if something has worked for you, you can share it with your colleagues, and the page is going to keep open for a while, and then we can close it at some point. So let's get back to our discussion again. The other thing that I would like you to reflect upon, and I will also, it's also on a link where you can continue the discussion, but probably I would like two people. What do you think would be the challenges on this journey on being critical? So meanwhile, let's move away now from the tips, and let's now think what would be the challenges. Let me see by show of hands, or you. I'm not going to share the link to the Padlet to put the information. What are you scared? What do you think would be the challenge in being critical, reading critically? Any thoughts? Yes, Robert.
Hello. Anji? Anji?
Anybody? What do you think would be the challenges for the process of reading work critically, evaluating other people's literature?
I can volunteer. I think.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
I was going to volunteer. For some people, it is accessing the literature. At the start, knowing what is relevant and what is irrelevant.
Yes, you have to be very, very selective, because now we are in an information age. I don't know, accessing, I was hoping that Makerere is subscribed to key journals and things. Is it still a problem, Anthony?
It is there, but not all literature. We can have access to a database, but may not have access to all the publications.
You may have to learn how to crack the firewall.
Yeah.
This, so I think if a student finds an article that they would like to read, but there's no access, in most cases, we haven't utilized the library services maximally. Can just the library people are employed to help, and they are usually well trained. They know how. There can be even interlibrary loans. They may have some memorandum of understanding with universities that have access to all the information. But students need to be aware of this and know who to really go to, like who is the key person at the main library, or if you have some librarians for the department or the college, utilize them, because they come from their homes every day, come to university to support students, but sometimes the students don't know that the service is there. So no student should uh, fail to read an article just because of accessibility. With the way the world has now really opened up to information and data sharing and things for open access, even authors themselves, they really like their work to be read. So someone, if all fails, you can be able to write to the authors themselves directly, get them on ResearchGate and request for a PDF. They will be happy to give it to you. So I hope no one suffers with the issue of access. At the end of this session, I want to encourage your students, Anthony, to join NIMRA. If a network, a platform with other postgraduate research students and academics, you should be able to get into a platform like that and ask someone and say, does anybody have access to this article, and really have it? So I hope that becomes one of our list challenges. But the other challenge that you have said, the challenge of being selective on what to read, because you can waste a lot of time and reading articles that are not relevant, or not being able to quickly find what's relevant. So I will talk a little bit about that at some point. But first, Rachel.
Thank you. I also just wanted to add that also synthesizing information from different sources to put them into one narrative is most times very challenging. And then there is also that issue of dealing with conflicting ideas or theories that you find in literature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's and when you, I'll start with the conflicting one. That's a very good one where to start your critique from, and I'll also show you the phrases that you can use when authors conflict, or when frameworks give different issues, and that's a good point for you to really show that you have analyzed the work, looking at different perspectives and different approaches. If you can identify those, and you write about them and what you think, and you base you build your argument, use that foundation to build your argument. It's a good one. It's highly respected if you can be able to evaluate like that. The other one was how to put all these together. I don't know. The other thing that I will emphasize, I was going to emphasize it at the end, is for you to learn to use reference literature management software, whichever one you use. Don't just use its aspects just to collect and sort of like store your literature, but use all the you have to use all the functions, its functionality, maximize. I think maybe Anton, at some point we could arrange for your student to sit with some guy who usually does this for NIMRA members with the Zetero, how to really use Zetero for analysis as well, for not only for collecting and keeping the literature, but also for analysis. you need, one of the challenges for critical literature review and writing is the use of the skill to use literature management software to maximize their functionality is something that and a PhD, when you do a PhD, it's a lot of investment. You invest a lot of money, invest a lot of time, the intellectual ability. It's going to stretch your intellectual muscle in a way that you probably have not thought about. And it's something that is not merely about attaining your qualification and the papers, but it is a time for development, for growth, for maturity, for knowledge, for acquiring skills. And so you should use this time to get this skill. But I think I need to move a little bit faster now, and we haven't even got to the real meat. See?
There's a hand up. I don't know. Andrew.
Okay, Andrew, can you?
Andrew here. Mine is a small one. Maybe you we could have mentioned about it, but in my search for literature review, and in what I've seen my colleagues doing is to now apply AI, and I usually use connectivity.ai that gets one paper and then kind of connects over hundreds of papers to that one paper you want, and try to get a whole view of one item you're looking at. What's your view about using such a method in the current state of literature research?
I am very conscious about AI. Actually, I was hoping that no one talks about it here, but of course we can't run away from it. It's here with us. We can't bury our heads in the sand. But I'm sorry to say, but AI is helpful, but it can be very stupid. So you have to be very careful with the results of an app, because an app will just go around the world and try to find what is likely to be beneficial to you, and then just throw it at you. You will still have to do a lot of work to evaluate what it has given you. In fact, to tell you something really funny, Kasinje, you know, this former police officer, he asked AI, and AI said a few things that were correct about him, but it also said that he's a member of parliament representing Kampala, which is not true. Kasinje has never been a member of parliament, but that's what I'm really saying. It can even give you can bring for you false citations. It can bring to you articles that are not really relevant to your research. And maybe when you go further to go to Google Scholar and try to find this article, you don't find it there. So you can be reliant on AI, but just for the basic search, for the basic, so Anthony, we need to go through a topic on searching and managing literature. We need to have a session on that with Conrad, taking the students through this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can give you this contact, how to search, how to use reference software to search, manage, and analyze literature, so that they can, the traditional way. I would like to encourage you to use the traditional way, because your brain is much smarter than AI and more objective, more accurate than AI. Don't ask artificial intelligence to, for example, to your research questions. It will bring you things that you still need to really, really analyze, although it's going to be helpful. But let's now move on a bit about how to evaluate your literature when you're reading. So when you're reading your literature and you want to bring in criticality, you can evaluate the following. So when you read someone's article, you can see their research coverage and see when was this work done. Probably it was, we are looking at death registration before COVID, and what is it like after COVID? So somebody might be giving an argument on death registration, but you may say that, oh, well, that stood before we were handling lots of deaths in one particular time, in the same period. But how would we do it if we got another pandemic? We were not prepared for it, and there was a pandemic. What if it happens again? How would we do it? These studies that tell us about it, they are talking about it. They were we can see all the publications were before COVID. So you can argue that, think about that. What's the implication of the fact that this work about death registration was one that was carried out before COVID, when we didn't have lots of deaths at the same time? You can start your evaluation from there. It can also be geographical coverage. For example, if you're looking at clean energy within, and most publications are talking about clean energy within urban centers, and they are concerned about pollution in urban centers, and probably you're thinking we need to think about clean energy in rural areas and how we can use it in rural areas to accelerate economic growth. So all of these articles that I am reading, I'm trying to find one that actually zeroed in the rural developed country area and the implications for that geographical scope. Or sometimes it can be about the demographical landscape of the participants. It could be that someone did net zero research with adults, but what does it have to do with babies, for example? So the research coverage can help. If you evaluate the research coverage, you can find where to stand to critique, to go with your critical lens on this kind of work. Then the other thing that you can look at is conceptualization. What terms, phrases are used? Could they have a different meaning? So death registration in a certain culture, they might be talking about death registration in certain ways. Maybe they register a death by cutting a tree, and you can go and find out how many people have died in this village by counting how many trees are remaining in that forest. Or is it some computerized? What do they mean by death registration? If you're talking about, for example, economic performance, clean energy and economic performance, and someone wrote about clean energy and economic performance, it's the same concept or same phrase they are using, but they were looking at economic performance in terms of household income, or they were looking at economic performance in terms of a mortality rate, or education, or whatever it is. For you, what is economic performance? And you can pick it up from there and say, while literature calls economic performance this, my study is calling it differently. You can also evaluate literature by looking at the data collection methods they used, analysis and interpretation. They could have done a quantitative evaluation of the situation, and you think maybe the qualitative bit wasn't done well, or the way the analysis was done. Or do you know, you can actually do like people who do secondary research and they use data sets. Someone had a research question, they went into the field, they went into Kampala and collected carbon emission related data. They analyzed it, got the answer for their question, but this data set is still available somewhere. And you can look at this data and say, okay, the way they analyzed it, I can analyze it in a different manner and get some information from it again. So you say, okay, the way they used this data, they analyzed it, they answered this question, but if we analyze it in a different way, we can get different conclusions as well. Also, you can check the approach that they used and ask yourself a question: to what extent did this affect their argument or conclusion? So maybe they collected different kind of data. They did some, the analytical approach could have affected their argument or their conclusion. And we said that when you're critical, for example, in this area, you don't say their argument or their conclusion doesn't hold. You only say that it could have been influenced by the kind of data they collected or how they analyzed it. So if we collect something different or if we analyze it differently, we can have another argument that takes forward the argument that this author has already given. So that's another good area where you can evaluate literature. You can evaluate literature looking at other authors' arguments. I think that's what Rachel was saying. There's many people, how do I critique it? And what if they have a different if they are contradicting each other? You can evaluate, you can say, okay, they all seem to go this way. They all seem to agree on this, but they seem not to understand the difference. They seem not to bring about the alternative way of looking at this. Or you could say, these authors, this author said that, but this author said this, and it was the contrary. And someone was also in the middle. The other arguments, sometimes authors are wrapped up together. You say, like, the people who argue this, there are others who argue that, and it's contradictory. But in the middle there are some who are half, one leg here, one leg there. But still all these contradictory arguments, they don't answer the research question in this manner. So it's good to read this article in relation to what other authors are also saying. That can also be a basis for evaluation. You can also look at the coherence and logic. Do they really have adequate justification for the claims? So there's this discussion, and they are talking about net zero and carbon, blah, blah, blah. And they are, the studies are looking at big cities around the world, and they are making big conclusions. And it's not logical that their argument is a universal argument, because there's no coherency in this. They haven't, for example, gathered data from other smaller cities or things like that. So you see, where are they coming from to make their particular argument? Because when you read a paper, it's going to have one or two arguments, one key argument that they are making, and it will be in the abstract. That's another way of making sure that you don't read a paper that is not relevant for you. Read the abstract, read the conclusion before you read the paper. Then you can make a decision whether you should read the whole of it or not. Because in those two parts, you will be able to see the one or two arguments that the authors are making. And when you get this argument that they are making, then you read the paper to see whether their argument is justified, where are the claims coming from, where the claims that they are making, where are they coming from, and then you can critique that and see where you can find the gap. And of course, it has to be really relevant to your work. So that is reading. There are more other hints or guidelines on how to critique other people's work, but I want to now quickly go to how to write. One tip is that you should not be very quick to start writing. You should your writing is as good as your reading. So which means it's not 50-50. It's if something is as good as the other, it means that the other one is very, very important. Your reading and your reflection and your analysis, and you will have maybe at this point you already have if you're like me, you already have a research journal, a research notebook somewhere, which is very dirty. Only you can understand what is in there. This links to the other, that links to the other. You use highlighters, different colors for different things that are popping up for question 1, things that are popping up for question 2, things that relate objective 1, things that relate objective 2. You have it all in your notebook. You do that quite a lot before you come to writing. And if you've done very good reading, then writing is going to be a bit easier. So writing, you need to be a critical writer. You need to state your objectives early enough. Point out to the reader your argument. Like I mentioned, when you're going to decide whether you should read this article or not, you read the abstract, you read the conclusion. So if you are a critical writer, you need your assessor or your future readers or your reviewer, the review of your paper, to see your argument right there as early as possible. Put it right there and make your point. Identify yourself very quickly. So if your examiner is going to read your dissertation or your thesis, they can see it in your abstract. And your literature review chapter, when you're introducing it, you have to come out really, really quickly to say, this is the discussion on the table, these are the issues around it, and this is how I'm going to contribute to the discussion on the table as quickly as possible. And also a critical writer really shows the extent to which existent literature has answered their questions or not. So that, in other words, you're putting in your new area, you're pointing your readers to what is really, really new. And of course, highlight the inadequacies in literature. Now, these things are not in any order, but after you've written your literature review chapter and your entire thesis anyway, can you try to see that you have highlighted inadequacies in literature, that your arguments, the arguments that you're making, you're not describing things, but you're putting there an argument, you're making a particular claim, and you have sufficient grounds for it. If you say you've decided that this is going to be the focus of your research, or this is the place where you're going to collect your data from, or this is the where you are going to analyze your data, or even in your findings, when you put down your findings and discuss them, and you're making particular claims, and you must make claims in your research, make specific claims, then ask yourself, where is the evidence? Give sufficient grounds for your argument. And your claims need to be ordered well, ordered persuasion. Persuade your readers, persuade your examiners that this is an issue and this is why it is an issue. There's plausible evidence from here, and you put it in a coherent manner. Don't make people think, where is this coming from? And I think the other advice that I will be giving probably at the end is that go for soft skills seminars and workshops, like writing, how to write, how to signpost your readers, how to convince them. It's quite important in critical writing, so that your reader does not think, where has this fallen from? It feels like it's come from the sky or something like that. It needs to be like a nice story from page 1 to when you conclude your last sentence. A nice story, one thing falling through and being connected to what has been said before. Some of the other tips is that you need to show how your argument advances literature. The kind of gap that fills. It can be advancing literature, but also can advance practice. You need to be assertive. Now, this is something that is not very easy from our education system. I struggled. You feel you are unnecessarily modest. Now, that kind of modesty is not helpful in a doctoral write-up. You have to be assertive. As long as you have your plausible evidence for your argument, be assertive. You don't be rude. You respectfully put your claim forward in critical writing. Respectfully put your claim forward. I think that's what I can say for being assertive. You provide the information, the interpretation, the evaluation, all this, you need to provide it more than describing. You can have a bit of describing the thing, but quickly dive into the interpretation and evaluation. You need to write well. Avoid jargon, avoid cluttering, avoid many points. If a sentence is too long, think about cutting it into 2. You can see how you can still communicate same thing in 2 sentences that was just in 1 sentence. I'm going to give you a very useful website for phrases that you can use to be critical. Attend workshops. I think seminars on writing skills development and all this. Like I mentioned, a doctoral journey is not a journey to just get a qualification. Once you have gotten your PhD, Anthony can testify, there's a lot of expectations from society on you, and you need to live up to that expectation. Isn't it true, Anthony?
Very, very true.
Yes, people, you'll have doctor before your name, and you need to prove that. And during this time, all the opportunities for developing yourself, you need to really get on this. I'll come to academic phrase bank later, but I just want to make this emphasis. So we looked at how to read critically. So the critical reader engages the author. So you are not going to be able to meet them, but you question them, you evaluate them, you rate them against the other authors, you measure them. You probably will not be able to hear from them, but if it means actually writing to them and getting a proper engagement with them, that you are becoming a critical reader. Someone who is not a critical reader is going to just go through things and be informed, and that's it. But you as a critical reader, you have to engage the author. And the things that I have mentioned about critical writing, it's basically about bearing in mind your reader, So you see, when you are being a critical reader, you are engaging the author. He's not there to answer your questions and things like that. But next time, others are going to be reading your work, and they will also use the critical lenses. Of course, the examiners will use a critical lenses. And if there are examiners that I know in Uganda who can sometimes be harsh, they are going to use the critical lenses. Your reviewers are going to use the critical lenses. So as you write, you have to bear them in mind. This is why I also mentioned that it's good to find out who is the Gulu in your area and how do they talk, how do they view things. If they like narrative reviews, maybe that's what you really need to get your hands on properly. If they don't like a certain way of analyzing data, you need to be aware of that and see how you can respectfully tell them that this is important. So you bear in mind your reader. Other people will be reading your work in a critical way, and you need to anticipate the way they will take your work and take care of their anticipations. The questions they will ask, they don't want to be saying, where has this fallen from? Why did they use this approach? Why are they answering this particular question? You want to anticipate these things early enough and be a critical writer and put them in place as quickly as possible. So the general tips really for gaining this skill is that you need to be very disciplined. There are lots of disruptions, and now with social media, it affects our attention span. We are no longer the way we used to be. Life has changed. There are lots of pressures and things like that. I don't know. It's really difficult now to be disciplined to, for example, block out time for working on your work and without interruption. Like leave your phone at home and go to the library. How many of you can do that? Or switch it off and say, I'm going to switch it off for 2 hours. And you're not going back to check what's on WhatsApp now. And this discipline, sometimes it's really difficult to do it on our own. That's why this last bulletin is form accountability groups for peer support. These ones are, I know there are people who are good at working on their own, but being in a group of 2-3 people where you tell yourselves, let's go. What's my target for today? My target for today is to find 5 important articles. And you go, and we are going to spend 2 hours together hiding in this place. For you, what's your target for today? My target for today is to deal with this feedback from my supervisor about this framework. He wants me to get to discuss it and have proper references on this framework, and I want to try and do it in 2 hours. And you, what's your target for these 2 hours? My target for these 2 hours is to do some annotate this literature and fill my journal with some information about how relevant it is for my first research question. And for 2 hours, block out everything, support each other, and at the end, ask each other how far they've gone and why, if they have achieved it and beyond, and say how did you do it? If they haven't achieved the target, what could have been the problems around it? Really, really support each other. And for searching relevant literature and using a SMART strategy, I'm going to put here Conrad so that Anthony can remember to bring this guy to tell you how to search for literature. properly and manage it, and not waste time on things that are not relevant, because it can be overwhelming. There's at one side you may not be able to have access to literature, but on the other side you may just have too much. It's time consuming, so you need a skill. It's a very, very important skill. And so Conrad will help you with these two, using the literature management software. But you can also just in your accountability group, you can say, let's go this Saturday afternoon, watch YouTube clips on how to manage literature, on how to target their approaches on how to really be effective in searching literature and manage it. You can watch a YouTube clip together, a group of 2 or 3 people, and get this skill with you. And so here, as these are not books or anything like that, but websites where you can find information to learn more about the things that we've just been saying today. But if you've never been used academic phrase bank, that it was developed by the University of Manchester, but available for anybody around the world, as long as you recognize them. Let me see if I can. Yeah, can you see this page?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So for criticality, this is like, and for phrases to use in academic critical reading and writing, this is a wonderful resource which is accessible to anybody in the world. And they can tell you what you would say if you're introducing your work, referencing to sources, describing methods, reporting results, discussing findings, writing conclusions, and how to be really critical and not descriptive. But also there's this side, there's on the left side, this menu also gives you examples on how to classify and list things, how to compare and contrast, how defining terms in a critical manner. This is interesting, by the way. Let's see. When I click, do I go to another page, or can you see defining terms?
Yes, we can.
Okay, defining terms. So they will tell you how to define terms in a critical manner, not just saying, okay, clean energy is a term that is used to blah 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 blah. Full stop. That would be just descriptive. You need to be critical in even defining clean energy. Like what it misses, the contradiction of other people, the difference in phrases. So, for example, clean means different for other people, and energy means different for other people. Be a bit reflective and critical in the way that you define terms. So this website is you will enjoy it. Maybe let me not say a lot, because it was really, really helpful for me in my doctoral journey, and I still use it now when I'm writing grants, when I'm writing for publication. I still use Academic Phrase Bank. It's one of your biggest friend. So the last question, the last slide, I'm not going to screen share again, was to say thank you to you. It's a pleasure for me to talk to you, so I'm grateful for that. And maybe we can have maybe 2 questions because we are over time. Anthony, I'm really sorry.
Yeah,
But
no,
we,
no, no,
but
no,
we
no.
started late. We
That
started
is
late,
true.
so I have you. Okay, so any 2 questions or comments?
Maybe there are some in the, or these
In the-
were just answering the questions before.
In the chat, let's see.
But if you have a question, this is the opportunity before we bring this to a close.
What are classics in literature review? I've never heard that. What are classics?
I think it is a reference to the previous posting. Some places insist that you should only be dealing with the recent literature unless it is a classic.
Classic. Classic meaning that it stands the test of time, like classical theories. What are classics? Oh, so okay, classics. If you're talking about time, because I know Makera is very keen with the year of publications for the literature that you review. Do you have a rule, Anthony? They should have.
Yeah, it shouldn't be older than, I don't know, is it maybe 10 years, but unless it is, this
classic.
Yeah, classic, relativity of, Newton's, that is a classic.
Okay, classic literature. I thought classics in literature. Okay. Yeah, now you have it. If it is a certain theory that is that stands the test of time, yeah, and maybe the assessors will use their discretion to say that you can use it. But yeah, it's quite important to look at the guidelines, your university guidelines in what at every stage of your PhD. Otherwise, these Antonies, they like to say, this is outside the guidelines. They like that. So it's important to check if they are not allowed to refer to literature that is 10 years old. So you see, you look for publications that were from 2014 and later. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, any thoughts, any last minute comments? Otherwise, Andrew?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a general question. When you're writing the background, that really takes in some literary references, there is a common statement about looking at the context of your work. Now, you're talking about your problem statement, and then talking about references in literature, and then converging them to have something which is contextual in terms of flowing it from up to down when you put up the problem statement. And even when you're writing these articles, journal articles, in the introduction section, it is very important for us to look at the context of your article in that introduction, and that's why you put the problem, and then also the references. From literature. Now, how would you relate context of your introduction, of your background, in terms of mining literature?
Well, I don't know if this applies to life sciences as well, but the background may not involve a lot of evaluation and reflection on the literature. What the background, in most cases, it may need to have real-time data, for example, so that you're not making claims that are just falling from the sky. So, for example, if you say that people are poor, you want to bring out like statistics, how many people are poor, what's their income, what are the issues, and refer mostly to reports and things like that. I think a reference to reports and not necessarily peer reviewed. Remember, reviewing literature literature review is mostly expected to be reviewing research that has been peer reviewed. So journal articles mostly. I don't know if this applies to you guys in engineering, but in social sciences, the literature review is mostly the research that other people have done. And this is where I was coming from with criticality. What have other people explored, and it's been peer reviewed, and they have gone through the rigor of research and have made particular claims basing on that. Now, in the background, you can have a bit of that, but mostly it is to set the background mostly sets a stage of the issue. The issue, and this stage is not necessarily dependent on the research that is already done, but what is happening in reality, the context. And it needs to involve, if you say the education in Uganda is not good, then you need to bring out the realities that are happening within the country that would make you pound the table, that people are graduating but they are not getting employment, or even when they are employed they are not delivering, and maybe even newspaper information can come into the background, reports, or some comments by journalists and things like that. Even though this information has not been peer reviewed, but they are facts, they are truth. It's not that you're making them up. They have been they have been published in newspapers or in a report somewhere. So this is what I think about context, but it might be different. Your supervisor might tell you what the culture that is, or maybe Anthony has a comment on that.
Hi, I think as you said, the supervisors will usually guide, but I think maybe at a later date we can see how we can have a discussion on this.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Loice for that very, very intriguing discussion. A number of issues intrigued me. The issue of the research journal took me back to those days when we were doing things by hand. Probably these days, instead of a journal, they have somewhere on their phones or whatever, but the more important point is that you need to keep track of what you're picking, what you're reading. And it's not unusual that what you see today is not important now, but maybe down the line you will remember what you wrote. And please take seriously the issue of accountability groups. It will help you push your work. Before I forget, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize Professor Dorothy Okele, who has joined us and has been with us. Thank you very much, Prof, and other staff who have been able to be here. Loice talked about NEMRA. It's an association. I'm also part of it. And it is a perfect place to go and learn from others of like mind.
Yeah.
I would also like to mention that especially those of you from SEDAT, we are hoping that by August, we shall have you having defended your proposals, as this opens up doors for you. Opens up doors for you to get your full admission, and with full admission, other opportunities will come your way. And one of them is the RIF funding. You can only get RIF funding if you have full admission. And one of the sure ways of improving your chances of getting being considered for refunding is by having some publications. And well, those of you who have been part of this know that I've been pushing you to have that as one of your first publications, your systematic literature reviews of the work that you have done. And I would like to encourage you to work on that. And as you can see, all of these discussions are geared towards equipping you to have this in place. Professor Dorothy Okello, can you greet us? Okay, probably she's tied up also. I would like to thank Loice for the follow-up topics that we can have. I will indeed DM you to get the details of Conrad, and as soon as Loice gets us the slides, we shall share them. Some of you have asked me to email them to you privately, and I will do that. Otherwise, thank you very much. We shall also make sure that we share the recording. Enjoy the rest of your evenings or your days, and till we meet in the next colloquium. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.